This is the Trusting Our Men interview series, where I explore and unpack what is still stopping us from cultivating trust, partnership, and safety with our men. Join me and my co-host Madelyn Moon as we have difficult conversations with conscious men in hopes of building a bridge of more compassion and understanding. Hello and welcome to Trusting Our Men again. I'm Nadia Munla and I'm here with my partner Maddie Moon, and today we have with us the absolutely fantastic John Wineland. Maddie, you want to intro him?
Yeah, John Wineland, an LA-based men's group facilitator, speaker, and teacher, has been guiding both men and women in the realms of life purpose, relational communication, sexual intimacy, and embodiment. Drawing from David Deda's revolutionary framework, as well as the deep lineages of Vajrayana, Tantra, Kundalini Yoga, Taoist, and Iron Shirt Qigong traditions, John seeks to create a profound experience for men and women longing to express their deepest desires with open, fierce, and loving hearts. Welcome to the interview series, John.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is particularly exciting for me because you're my teacher and I just love soaking up all of your insight and information, and like today's topic is going to be so juicy and deep.
So John, we wanted to start us off in this conversation and ask what's really alive for you right now in the world of gender dynamics?
Well, leadership. The topic of leadership has been alive. I'm writing on it. I'm writing a couple of books, one for men and one for men and women. And this idea of what it means to lead from the masculine, what masculine leadership should look like these days. And so that has been a very how to do it, how to share it, how to set her up to lead when you can't lead, where to lead her, how to lead her, what is it, does she even want you to lead her? All of these things are really alive, not only in the couples that I coach and the programs that I'm running, but in the just kind of my own personal relationships and what I'm writing.
And is there anything in particular you're seeing that we're, I guess, not necessarily sinking our teeth in the right way in terms of how we are leading right now, leading the conversation, leading our dynamics?
Well, I mean, the context is key here. And the context is, if you want a polarized relationship, right? If you want a relationship that's got a really deep, now not everybody wants that, nor do they have to want that, but if you do, as a man, as a woman, it doesn't even have to be man and woman, it could be two men, it could be two women, but if you want a polarized relationship, then one person has to sort of be in a surrender mode, right, and allowing leadership, and one person has to be holding the space and being directive. So another way to think about that is that one has to be directive and clear and have a vision of what needs to happen in this moment or in this period, and one needs to sort of be in the expressive mode, allowing sort of love and emotion and these kinds of things to flow through. And when those two things come together, then you have a polarized moment. And so leadership could be, she's leading me, but somebody's got to be in the masculine, somebody's got to be in the feminine for it to be clean. Otherwise you have two alphas trying to lead each other, right? Kind of barking at each other is what it ends up looking like. And so what I'm noticing with a lot of women, is how deep their mistrust of the masculine goes, and how, for good reason, and how much they want to surrender leadership to somebody that they trust, but how deep the tentacles of control go, and really letting that go is a very, very, tender and vulnerable experience for most women. And most men don't know how to be meticulous in terms of holding that. So we're in this kind of place where we want to go someplace, but most of us don't know exactly how to step into it. And that's really where my work has been for the last, few years.
You find in this feminist world, when women hear about this concept of surrendering and letting go, it feels almost, yes, controversial, but also like a disrespect to women. Like, we just got our voice, we're getting our power, we're taking a stance and leading.
Yeah.
We want to lead alongside our men. What like kind of fights or arguments do you hear around that, and what is your contribution?
Not as many as you would think, right? Because I think most in the sexual realm, when you bring this up, like, would you rather, when you ask a woman who's a powerful, successful, feminist, right? I know plenty, but if I ask that woman, would you rather surrender your heart to someone that you trust fully to take you someplace that you can't take yourself? Most of them are like, fuck yeah. Like, I don't want to, I'm killing it in the world and in my life. I don't want to have to, I would rather do that. So it's funny. I actually think I'm getting less pushback from feminists on this, right? Because most of them in their hearts, their essences are feminine. Now, their capacities in the world might be highly masculine, and they have to hold space. They have to be directive. They have to set goals. They have to be clear. They have to lead teams. But sexually, their essence, they can't lie. And most of them are like, yeah, I want that. I just don't know how to navigate the fluidity between what I have to do in the world and what I have to do at home. So that's been my experience. It's actually kind of a surprise that I don't get more push. Now, occasionally I'll post something about this and I'll get some knee-jerk reactions about, misogyny or the patriarchy. But when I'm really talking with a woman one-on-one or in a workshop, you guys have seen this. Most women are like, yeah, please, please, brother, take over. I'm tired of leading.
I'm curious to ask a question about the men's experience in all of this. And when I'm saying men, I really mean anyone of primarily masculine essence. It seems like a lot of work to have to then be directive both outside in the world and then also come home and do the same in the relationship. And I have heard the argument from some of my male friends who are like, it's too much. And this is also like, why do we have to put this all on? Why does it all come on our shoulders? And so I'm curious if that comes up at all with the men that you support as well, or even in your own experience.
Yeah, of course. And in my own experience, this is true. Yeah, it is too much. And normally the reason why most men are not nourished enough to do it are two things. A, they don't nourish themselves in solitude and with other men, right? They don't actually have nourishment. They have lots of numbing activities and they have lots of sort of distractive activities in their life, but they aren't truly nourishing themselves in nature, with other men, in solitude, or in just kind of they don't spend enough time in meditation, doing nothing, connecting to the world, the big feminine. And so they're malnourished. And then the second reason why is because most women do not actually express, most women are not responsive enough to really, I don't say reward them, but reward their efforts is the best way I can put it, right? So if a man actually does leave in the world all day and then he comes home, and he's like, okay, my love, we're going to have dinner, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and I'm going to take you here, I'm going to draw you a bath, and then I'm going to lay something out for you, and then we're going to spend an hour together, right? To do that does take effort. And if she's still mad from last week because he didn't do something, or she's not fully expressing love through her body, it will feel malnourishing. He will not be interested. Which is where I find most men who have a responsive woman, responsive feminine partner, let's say, it doesn't have to be a woman, feel pretty nourished in leading, because there's nothing better than your energy, trusting whether it's your grief, whether it's your sexual energy, whether it's your freak, whether it's your, devotion, whether it's your rage, right? So most women are locked up. And so most men feel malnourished because we get fed by your heart's energy.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So when you find a man who has a responsive woman and who is taking time alone in nature to regenerate and like I try to take trips by myself a few times a year, just like nobody. I'll go surfing, or I'll go in the mountains, or I'll do this stuff because I have to. Otherwise, I won't be able to lead who I need to lead.
Mm-hmm. I think this rewarding piece was one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over this year, of revealing the joy that comes with getting something that nourishes me. Because so often when I would finally get what I want, say that he begins to lead me in a way that feels really good to me, either one, I would be like, it's about time. And like, then we just go do the thing. And so I'm just like, okay, cool, great. We're going to dinner and you pick the place. Awesome. Or wanting to stifle my excitement and joy and pleasure from it out of fear that it won't last forever. It won't be permanent. So why get excited about it now if it's just going to go downhill later?
Exactly. That's exactly right, Madeline. That's I see that a lot. The third thing I see on top of those two is a holding a resentment, right? Or he was an asshole a half an hour ago, but now he's course corrected, but you're still in a half hour ago. And you're not only in a half hour ago, but you're in the trigger of all the times that men did what he did to you a half hour ago. So the fact that he's showing up impeccably now doesn't mean shit. And so this is why embodied practice is so crucial, because without it, it's hard for responsiveness to get cultivated. There's too much. Women, and I'm saying women specifically, have had to armor up so much over the last, 100,000 years really. But the armor now it's especially this is sort of an unforeseen byproduct of feminism, is that the armoring up of having to be in the corporate world and hold that, which is 50 years, it's really only 50 years that's happened, has created something that the modern woman has to deal with. And embodiment work is the best way, dance and movement and feminine movement, nonlinear movement. Otherwise, you're not going to be responsive because there's a sheath.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys find that? I'm just curious. I'm a dude here.
100%.
Yes.
We're nodding like, yep. Been there, done that. Been there, done that.
Expression was just something that wasn't in my life, like lighting up in joy. And I had no idea how desperate men were for amplification of emotion, because the whole polarity, the polar opposites of like, if the masculine is like consciousness and I don't want to say the word stoicness, but like stillness, then the opposite is going to be like, excitement, energy, sadness, all the different things. And so I spent so much of my life trying to somber myself and be one of the guys, because I thought that was better, that I wanted to be one of the guys and distance myself because I had all these stories and limiting beliefs and all this about women and the femininity. So I worked on that and I created more sisterhood and connection. And then I started feeling these feelings, and it's just like, oh my God, it's amazing to see how much you can light up not only your own world, but the world, period, and men and their world, just from them seeing emotion, the emotion that they are not quite as in touch with within themselves.
Yeah, and I think it makes most women happier, right? Because happier is not the right word. It's truer, right? So even if you're dealing with grief and you're expressing the grief and amplifying it, which is the key word here, amplifying it in the moment, then you're in your essence. You're not trying to be something that you're not. And I think that the key work for the feminine in the next few years is going to be, how do I know what's actually true for me, which is a whole skill set in itself. How do I become aware enough to know that I'm sad or angry or longing or yearning? And then how do I cultivate the capacity to express it in a way that is artful?
So I'd love for us to talk a little bit about, something that's been coming up a lot in these conversations, especially in the post-Me Too world. There's been a lot of guys coming to me sort of speaking about their fear, their hesitation around really connecting to their primal sexuality. And I empathize so much, because I feel like the rules are changing and everyone's confused. And so part of the intention behind these conversations is to really start to bring up, well, where are these areas, both in men and women, where we have these sort of darker, more taboo, less spoken about fantasies or scenarios. And now we have this world where every tiny move has to be calculated. And it seems like the two are really coming head to head. And as a result, everyone is sort of contracting and just going like, I'm just going to hang out here until the world figures out and gives us a manual. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, it's a shit show. It's
yeah.
a shit show, really. I mean, do you want a man? Do you want a lover to go, oh, baby, is it okay if I kiss you now? Right? Okay, good. Can I put my hand on your ass? Oh, I'd really like to lick you. Can I lick you? Is that okay? I mean, like, would you want a lover to do that?
I wouldn't.
I don't know. Do you?
It's interesting because there's been mixed responses about that.
Yeah.
I both of us agree that we're like, nah. I mean, I would like an occasional ask,
check in,
but it's a check-in.
Right.
I think that's the difference. Maybe it's check-in versus a sense of hesitation, because I think the second we feel wavering, it's sort of like
the equivalent is you telling me how to have sex with you. That's how it feels to a man when you say do this or do that or let's do this. It's kind of the equivalent of me like asking permission to consistently do that. Now, both of those things need to happen, and yet both of those things are depolarizing if they're not done consciously. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, of course you need to tell me what you love, what you want, but to do it in a way that's not depolarizing is the art. Of course I need to check in with you and see what feels good to you, right? Especially when we get into these darker realms. But I need to do so in a way without, right? So there's a couple of ways to look at this. One is what I would call healthy communication, and the other is what I would call sort of a sacred practice. And in the healthy communication, what David Data would call second stage, there's communication. Now most of this should happen after making love, right? So here's what I love. Here's what I wanted more of. And then you can get a lot of information that way. It's a really great practice and a very easy way to kind of debrief on what was cool, what they liked, what they wanted more of. But in sacred practice, our bodies are so attuned, and I've done enough work so that I can actually feel you, sometimes better than you can feel yourself. And you've done enough work so that you're responsive in a way that's absolutely moment to moment honest, like this. Yes, so you might be like moaning 1 minute and like sticking your tongue out the next. It's a moment by moment. That practice, to have sex from that practice, from that deep and embodied space, is a whole new ballgame, and that requires a pretty deep commitment from both people. It's like you're Olympians.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're training for the Olympics of sex, and both of you have to be really in your body and really aware. So with regards to dark energy, a man's sensitivity to what it is that the place where, I'm just trying to think of how to do this. If you're going to do something like we had talked about, a rape fantasy, right? If you were going to do something with your partner, now it has to be obviously in a consensual, trusting container. This is not the kind of fantasy you tend to play out on the first couple of dates. People can be hurt. People can be really hurt if there's not a really clean container. And so setting this up requires meticulousness. So if I was going to lead, is it cool if I just kind of jump into this topic? Okay.
Yeah.
If I was going to lead a fantasy around resistance and around a rape fantasy, it's really important that I'm meticulous in the container. So, baby, if anything you ever want me to stop, just say this or put your hand up. Otherwise, this is how we're going to do this. And you kind of set it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And meticulousness really around, have I created a space where she feels safe? Right? I like to have candles, or, like create a certain kind of specific space that's like a sacred practice space. Music, awareness, practice, all of those things create a really beautiful, when I say practice, I mean, breath, embodiment, awareness. All of those things create a container that's required if that kind of work is going to go deep. So within that, once that happens, then it's kind of game on, and as long as he's sensitive enough to really feel where she is a yes, even if she's resisting, all of that can go very, very deep. If a man is sensitive and a woman is responsive, or another way to put it, if a man is embodied and conscious and a woman is heart open and responsive, or a feminine partner and a masculine partner in any gender orientation.
Is there, I keep thinking about the BDSM world as well here, because I feel like they've been working on with the consent model for a really long time, because it's so necessary, obviously, because of all the dominance and submission dynamics that are involved in all of that. And so I'm curious if your version of this is a little bit different, because I think for them, there's so much focus on, from my understanding, I'm not in that world, but
not personal practice.
Well, but I'm not really in that world, but from what I understand, there's, it's so much about the conversation before, which of course is setting up the container. But I don't know that there is as much emphasis on the like moment to moment, the nonverbal piece of things and the more embodied version of things. So I'm curious if there's anything else you had to add about that piece in particular, since that's your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so what I've seen in the BDSM world is they're very good at creating meticulous containers. Where I've seen problems is that they haven't cultivated the yogic sensitivity to feel hearts moment to moment. And the thing that allows for really dark energy to happen is that there has to be an incredible connection of hearts. Like I've got to be looking into your eyes. I've got to be feeling your heart. I've got to be, feeling the inside of your body and really putting my awareness. The way that I was trained is I feel me, I feel you, I feel the space. And then from there, what wants to happen is going to come through both of us. That's good masculine leadership at its core, right? Whether we're going to dinner or we're having a really deep sexual experience. So I don't think that most BDSM people have been trained in that. And I have people come to me who can get traumatized, because even with a conversation before where consent is given, if it's not enough for us to say, like, let's say we have this conversation about like, okay, we're going to play a rape fantasy. You and I are in a committed relationship. Here's your safe word. If we're going deep and you're truly in your feminine, you might forget that you have a safe word, because that's what happens. But then I do something that triggers you, and you kind of go into a trauma response, which happens, and I'm not feeling it. And so if I'm not feeling it and I'm putting all the pressure on you, I'm kind of being unfair from a masculine perspective, where I'm saying, okay, you have the safe word, and I want you to surrender completely to me in a sexual moment. A feminine being fully surrendered in a sexual moment will be mindless.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of fucked up for me to say, oh, and I want you to remember the safe word. That's like almost saying, I want you to surrender completely, but keep one little toe in the masculine so that you can be self-sufficient.
Mm.
And that's part of the real, wouldn't you rather just, I know this is not very common, but as a woman, wouldn't you rather just know that I'm feeling you so deeply that if something goes wrong, I'll know? Like if you check out, if you freeze, if you go into trauma, I'll be like, well, baby, what's up? Where'd you go? Would you rather have that? Or I would think most women would want that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that where the wheels are still turning is is
can see
more
it.
around like how the level of trust is just one that I've personally never experienced, I guess. So for me, I'm just like,
Yeah.
in theory, that sounds great. And I imagine a lot of men, I'm also thinking about the men's experience here, which is part of like this experiment. Maddie and I are like here to talk to the guys to be like, what's going on for you guys? Because we know what's going on for us. And I feel like for a lot of men, they probably are also not trusting both themselves and our responses, because there's been such mixed messages, because we've had such a like, you were saying no, but our bodies are saying yes, and the other way around. And also our own history of not being able to speak our truth for so many reasons. So I feel like there's just like so many pieces in that, making it really challenging to just be like, oh yeah, I totally trust you, you're good.
Yeah, of course. And that's why for most, in most situations where you're playing with dark energy, there needs to be a safe word, I think, or there needs to be something. And that's why in workshops, you guys have been in workshops, so that we're like, hey, put your hand up. But how many times do women actually forget to put their hand up? And then they'll come afterwards and they'll be like, it was too much, or he didn't feel me, or I could, you know what I mean? And so it's one of the things I actually wrote about with Me Too. Like a woman in her feminine first doesn't feel safe to say no, because for hundreds of thousands of years she's been beaten, tortured, raped, and brutalized for saying no. So that's in your epigenetic body. And two, if she's in a feminine space, she'll she'll really kind of go with the flow. A man too, a man who's being led well. If I have a masculine partner and he's leading me well, I'm mindless. So saying no in that moment, it'll be confusing if someone's really like, so sensitivity training in this is so crucial. And yeah, of course, this is one of those things where, and this is the thing I see with women a lot, is to find what is trustable in the moment, with your partner, and hone in on that, because you're not only awoken to your own mistrust, I'm seeing, but the mistrust of generations of women, and the mistrust of men who are largely unconscious. There's a lot of unconscious men. So even the good ones. So yeah, we got work to do, but it's crucial that men develop this capacity to take a woman into dark, loving space. It's crucial, because otherwise it starts to come out in weird ways. And she won't really give you her heart if you don't. Man.
Yeah, and I want to also just touch on the part that's nourished in a woman by this fantasy. Going back just a little bit, like, why are we talking about this at all?
Right.
The reason why we really wanted to speak on this dominance fantasy, a rape fantasy, is because I think there's a lot of course, taboo around this and shame around this. And I'm still surprised when I hear so many people say, I have that, me too. And there's so many women who have this yearning, this fantasy to be so desirable that they have no choice. Like, they're taken, but they're taken in the safe way, where there's context, there's a container. It can't just slip in the middle of the night. It has to be known. It has to be safe. It has to be sacred. And that's what we're talking about, the men's work here, of like how we can surrender. But I want to normalize this fantasy, just because for a lot of people hopping on and listening to this, it might be the first time that they're ever hearing this is a thing. And it's maybe a thing they have as well. And so I want to, since you hear from so many women and they come to you about their deepest, sexual desires, I'm curious what your thoughts are on what this nourishes. Well, what's the good in this? What is the good for a woman in fulfilling or even owning and embracing her rape fantasy?
Yeah. Well, I want to expand it just a tiny bit beyond rape fantasy, right? First of all, I'm really glad you stepped back and brought that. What is the value? That's a great question. And the value is, there is a nourishment around allowing yourself to be led, if you're a feminine partner, allowing yourself to be led, especially sexually and into your heart, because ultimately leading you sexually is leading you into your heart in the deepest way, right? It's not about orgasms. It's about leading you into a deeper place in your heart that, of course, your body is, all of the rest of your body is connected to. And it's almost like a return home, right? A return home. And a man who can help you return home to like the deepest part of your heart, the part of your heart that is absolutely wild and surrendered and open, and just the living expression of the infinite river of love in that moment. That's a very valuable partner. And so for men, a lot of the work that I do is trying to A, teach them how to take a woman there, and B, then teach a woman how to like trust it. Those are two really big pieces. So that's the spot. I mean, you guys can speak to it because you're women. That's what I hear and what I've seen, that there's something primal, essential. It's I guess the best way I could put it, it feels like a return home for most women to be led that deeply into that dark of a space. Does that feel right to you guys?
Oh yeah, my body's like, yes. I was like, okay.
Most women, like, this is, I mean, I've said this before in workshops, but when we get women together and we say, okay, ladies, go off and like, let's talk about your gnarliest fantasies. And then like we do the same for the men. The women are always coming back with the freakier shit. The women are always like, he puts a bag over my head, throws me into a van, drags me out into the woods, where I'm gang raped and tied to a tree. And these are like women coming up with their own taboo fantasies. So there's something about like, and this is the piece with Me Too and in the post-feminine world that a lot of women are ashamed to admit. The part that wants to be dominated, the part that wants to be ravished and beyond ravished, just controlled, owned, right? And at least in a sexual moment, like of course not throughout your life, but in a sexual moment or relationally in a certain way, and finding that space, carving out that space that's in a safe and really artistic way is like the top 2% of sexual practice, I think. And where the juice is for me.
If this is something that a woman's craving to see happen, how do I formulate this question? Do you advise that when she's reclaiming this part of her, like, I want to feel ravished by my partner in a way where I'm demonstrating resistance, and I go into that fantasy land and I want to feel it all. If she wants this, how do they start this conversation with their lover? Like, how do you evoke this within your partner? What do you need to do?
Great question.
Not asking for me or anything.
Yeah. How do you evoke this? Well, so whoever is the deeper practitioner in a relationship should start the direction. Now, if I'm working with a man, I'm going to say, and David talked about this in The Way of the Superior Man, and I'm writing a whole fucking book on it. So it's really about, if you are the masculine pole in a relationship, it's your job to feel where she and the sex needs to go and lead it there. So the idea of, it's not just, resistance and rape, but it's, where does she have shame around her sexuality? Where is she ashamed or closed in her sexuality or in her heart? And if that's the case, then so for example, I know this might shock you, but some women have like, sort of daddy issues, right? And yet there's this sort of interesting sort of thing about wanting daddy energy as a way, not all, but some do. I've seen this a lot, where there's daddy fantasies, or there's daddy sort of energy that's craved. And so your capacity as a masculine partner to take her there, into this place where this fantasy gets worked out, it's kind of like a sacred performance art. It requires a lot of creativity, requires a lot of sensitivity. Now, resistance is one of those fantasies as well. But to me, it's my value as a masculine partner is to feel where there's any shame or closure around you or your sexuality, and then to create sexual yoga, which is the deepest yoga, in my opinion, to open, to take you into that, open your body, run the energy through that. And that's deeply healing. I mean, that changes your karma faster than anything I've seen. To use great sexual practice to deal with that changes a lot. So I just wanted to add that piece, that it's not just, it's any sort of darkish energy.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, I'm curious about like the men in all of this. So like, I feel like there's a lot of guys who are going to be like, I don't know, do I really want to take this risk? Because there's all these legal ramifications. My career is going to go, any wrong move. And there's so much at stake now, right? And in a way, rightfully so. I don't know. That's a separate conversation. I guess we can argue both ways. But there's so many consequences now. And so for a lot of guys, they're going, you know what? I just don't even want to go into the gray area. So I'm curious, if you had to pitch to the guys why this is, what they can actually get from this, from on the other side of it, right? What would you say?
They know. The deepest satisfaction as a man is to take a woman deep, like really into her body and in her heart. And the kind of level of surrender and energy and nourishment that you get as a man is beyond. It's literally why men have done the weird things that they've done throughout history with regards to, building the Taj Mahal. They'll do, for that energy, men will sell their souls, quite frankly. So most men are settling for kind of mediocre sex that can have some kink to it, but there's none of that deep heart connection or deep surrender. And so most men, just like I said, most women intuit this piece. Most men intuit like, wow, there's a level of depth that I can take my sex to, and I can take a woman into, and I can take my love into, that is beyond anything that I've ever experienced. And they intuit that it's beautiful. So I think that where most men run into problems is that they're lazy about creating containers. Most of the issues in Me Too were shitty containers with no sensitivity. And that's why let's say you're going into a relationship, first of all, if you're a man taking a woman as deep as we're talking about, you better have a good container. Otherwise, you're a fucking asshole, because you're going to take her someplace that's really sensitive and really tender. And, you can hurt her if you just, do this and then drop her. So not only aftercare is even the minimum, but like what, really, like, is this woman ready for where you want to take her? Right? Are you ready to hold all of the stuff that's going to come out? Because it's going to pop the top off, grief and shame and self-loathing and all of these things, right? And so you better be ready to handle that and be a yes. So I teach men, like, look, if you want to really experience the depth of love that's possible, you've got to be a yes to this whole experience. Taking her deeper than she can take herself, being with all of the stuff that comes up with that, leading her through her resistance, because her resistance is not just in a sexual fantasy. Like, her resistance will be to your leadership almost completely. And she won't want to go to the women's group that she has to go to, right? She won't want to take a walk with you when that both of you need to take a walk because it'll help her mood. She will want to push you away when you pull her towards you saying, baby, and try to show her how much you love her. So resistance, feminine resistance, is all over the relationship, right? It's all over it. And good masculine practice is to say, okay, baby, yeah, I know you're resisting me. And finding that art where it's not, what would you call it? It's not invasive. The third stage, as David would say, the sacred boundaries are very sketchy. boundaries are very sketchy. And what makes sketchy boundaries tolerable, not even tolerable, but totally acceptable, is a level of heart connection, love, and sensitivity that is rarely experienced. That make sense? I mean, we're getting this. Nothing's more controversial than saying true love has sketchy boundaries. True practice has sketchy boundaries. The other way around, like with him, like he might be like, no, baby, I don't want to get off the couch. I'm watching the game. And you might know that he needs to get up, have sex, and remember that, life is beautiful. But he doesn't want to get off the couch, right? He's watching the game or whatever. But you can know that this man needs to feel his body. And so you seduce him, lure him, cajole him into a deep experience. Have you violated his boundaries? Yeah. Is it for his own good, so to speak? Yeah. So going back to Maddie's question about the rape fantasy in particular, the resistance piece is, what makes it so hot, in my opinion, is because it's not just about the sex. It's about the whole play of each partner, if done right, is recognizing the sacred piece of, I'm leading you somewhere and you're fully surrendering to it. And that, done properly, is so hot and so fulfilling for both partners, and so rare to be done properly.
Yeah. God. The aftercare and the dropping, that in particular, like, I feel is so important, and we don't give enough attention to. And the immediately afterwards, the dropping, and the disconnect. It's like, it's a very scary experience whenever you have such a deep, intimate moment, and then immediately just stops, cut off. So I love that you brought that up. Additionally, I wanted to share like just a small little mind fuck for me that I put together. And this is why I think honoring like what you're talking about, that this takes us somewhere incredibly healing. And maybe at first glance, we don't realize what these fantasies do for us. But when I look about my upbringing, there was a lot of, it's like no exploration of me as a young woman. Like who I was going to be was determined from the start. So I never felt respected. And I never felt like I had a choice in anything. So not having a choice in any of my childhood led me to an adolescence and an early adulthood where I was constantly, I got a choice. Like I'm like the leader of my own life and constantly fighting for that. And then one of my deepest fantasies is having all that taken away. And experiencing having no choice in a sacred way, which I can now see would heal so much from that pain from childhood.
Yeah. Well, you've been in this for a year with me, right? So, we've been kind of setting the groundwork for it. The deepest healing happens in this sort of sexual yogic practice.
Yeah. Because
you're taking your biggest wounds and you're running love and sexual energy through them in a way that is truly enlivening and held, and it totally rewires our nervous system. This is what hooked me to this work. It's like watching this happen in me and in others, was this capacity to take these like primal wounds, these core wounds, these core pains, and then run love fuck through them, for lack of a better term, right? Run God and sexual energy through them in a way that like just made everybody more free and more open and more alive. And it's obvious, you see it all the time. So this is in my opinion, that's why this work, that I'm dedicating my life to, and that people like David and other people have, is the shit, in my opinion, because it heals things very, very deeply that therapy takes. I mean, can you even get to it in therapy? I mean, how do you get to that shit in therapy? And the one thing I want to say, because it's not to your point about like why get into the dark energy at all, because if we just live, so we have the heart, right? We have the light spectrum of heart energy, love and light, right? And that has a certain frequency and a certain power. But the level of power that exists from the lower body, the lower chakras, the place where the darker energies live, it's like it's like, if the best example, I think I use this in the workshop, it's like listening to music, right? Like you turn on your car stereo, right? And you have an amplifier. Like, remember the old school amplifiers? You actually like push the button and then 300 watts kick in of like bass. And, it's like listening to music with a badass amplifier. And you need the dark energies and the lower chakras and that whole part of your sexuality to get the richest experience of listening to the music. That's why men and women, all people, should play in this realm in a way that's safe. Most of them don't, and then they get freaky with, they'll end up with prostitutes or with men that abuse them, or rape fantasies, or porn, or it's because there hasn't been a clean way for us to express this to each other.
The other thing that I'm really hearing in all of this, like sort of a through line, is the fact that, socially speaking, we're so focused, we're in a chapter of humanity, we're so focused on mind. And so everything's very literal. And I think going back to the conversation of, okay, there's a conversation that's had through words, and then there's a conversation that's had through the body. And we've gotten so disconnected and disembodied that there is less value and less tools that are given to us around the conversation that is nonverbal, that is more embodied. And so going back to when you were speaking about the guy sitting on the couch and his partner being like, I want to, coax you out of this like fog that you're in. It's like there is so much focus on just having the literal conversation of like, oh no, baby, I'm actually okay. I'm going to sit on the couch. And there being this like, okay, well, that just means this is it. I can't, that's the boundary. When in fact, there's these two different layers. And I'm just like, I'm just loving that. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah. I mean, sacred practice, is kind of it's kind of a violation, right? Which is what we're talking about, like violating for the sake of love. If I can relax your control, right? Your need for the modern, I'm going to go even further. I'm going to say the modern woman's kind of addiction to control. If I can relax that through violating you for the sake of love, that's quite a gift I'm giving you as a masculine practitioner. If you can bring me into my body and it help me remember that that life is good and I have a body versus living in my mind all day long. And if you can use your slut, your devotion, all the the palette of sexual energy a feminine partner can bring, then you're serving me very deeply. And I think that the problem in this post Me Too era is, how do we honor these? We definitely need better boundaries, better communication, more sensitivity and all of that. And the deepest practice, the deepest art still is in a strong container. How do I violate those boundaries in the moments where you have lost yourself? And that is a commitment to healing and love that I think most relationships don't commit to. And at the core of all this is, are we a stand, as man and woman, as masculine partners, feminine partner, to heal each other, right? Are we a stand to heal each other? Because what we're really talking about is the depth of healing on the planet that's never happened. Never happened. We're in a moment of history where men have literally run the planet into the ground and abused women right? Women are just waking up to that. The world is waking up to that. So as men, we're in this moment of history that's quite profound. As women, you're in this moment of history that's quite profound. And then this whole conversation, I feel, is the bigger conversation of how do we heal? And how do we heal each other and move forward in a higher level of consciousness?
Amazing. Now that we got everyone really excited about all these practices, where can people find you?
Yeah, and my website, johnwineland.com. Wine like you drink, land like you live on. Got my programs for next year. We just launched, all the programs. All the information is there.
Mm. Awesome.
So
I
good.
run 9-month programs. So yeah, Madelyn's been in one, 8 or 9 month programs. The men's program is a deep dive into men's work. The women's program is a deep dive into the women's work. And then we have a co-ed program that I do with Kendra. So that's my main jam.
Awesome.
Quick fire round time.
Bring it.
Ready? All right. These are one-word answers, so it's even more challenging.
Okay.
All right. What do you love most about the feminine?
I'm just going to say devotion.
Mm. What do you love most about the masculine?
Fierceness.
What do you want to see more of in women?
Responsiveness.
One word to describe yourself.
Here.
And then one word describing what you'd like to see come out of this conversation.
Possibilities.
John, thank you for joining us in this interview series. As always, I'm mesmerized and I'm marinating and I'm just like in love with everything you say and share. So thanks for going there. Thanks for going there with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to get into this with you guys. It's great that you're doing this.